Close your eyes if that feels comfortable. If not, just relax your gaze and fix on an object at like a 45-degree angle, downcast with your eyes, and just keep it rested there. Let's just take 3 breaths, fully present breaths. Every moment of the inhale, the pause. Every moment of the exhale, a pause. Being present. Relaxing any areas of tension, obvious areas of tension. And bringing us a spirit of kindness and friendliness to ourselves. Okay, you ready? You can open your eyes. You can continue meditating too. I thought today's Open Wisdom Wednesday, which I've kind of renamed Wisdom Wednesdays, I've got Irregular Wisdom Office Hours. I ask unplanned, general, and specific questions for your wisdom, and you ask me. In the meantime, we share openly, likely from whatever's currently happening, to get at our wisdom. And for me, what's going on currently is I'm house sitting in rural Illinois for some friends who are taking their small children on vacation, and it's been quite a blast here. I've been taking care of dogs and cats and chickens, and they're off grid. So it's been, using the power to minimum when I need to and charging electric car and keeping an eye on that and learning about kind of power consumption, how the user end of that goes. So it's been a great experience doing this. And of course, it's a perfect place here in a wooded area in rural Illinois to meditate. There's really no excuse not to. Can go deeper with less distractions, at least from, the general hubbub and distractions that some people can get with other people sometimes. So that's been great. I think what it brought up for me reflecting on what I would talk about today is living in general. Vihara in Buddhism, it's called vihara, abode or living place. So of course we all are living somewhere, whether we want to or not, whatever space this meat sack is inhabiting. So we've got ranges from everywhere, from people who are on the streets, or maybe developing nations who don't really know minute by minute where their body's going to be, or what's really they're going to do to find shelter, and then all the way up to opulent palatial palaces where every desire and whim and fancy is on offer, and it's really huge compound complex, and safety and worldly pleasure, whatever, and everywhere in between. And then we've got people that are deliberately on the move, kind of like me. They don't really have a home base right now, deliberately so. Some people not so deliberately so. Then you've got other people who are nesting, I would say. They're with their significant other. They even maybe have children, and like this place, like animals and places like that. And so these are hugely, vastly different lifestyles, but there's similarities. So no matter where we're at or what we want, whether we want to be nesting or we want to be kind of a vagabond or a digital nomad, kind of like I am for the moment, or a pilgrim or a seeker. There's really no judgment either way. It's just kind of assessing, what's best for me and the loved ones around us, and maybe even what's better in the long term for me and my loved ones, and maybe all beings everywhere, and kind of what my strengths and weaknesses are, what it makes sense to do, how well am I spending my time around this? Am I needing to put in more time, or am I spending way too much time on this? So is it Claude or Claudia says, like me, retired in a city, but with a ravine, lots of wildlife. Yeah, so you got the kind of best of both worlds there, a city, but also wildlife. For me, that's a really huge thing, access to nature, whether it means living in a dense urban area, but I can get out of the city really quick and easy. Been about half and half, in my life, rural areas and cities. So, yeah, how much long-term planning do we need to do with this, and how much don't we need to do? How many, I mean, making travel arrangements now and all this stuff. So I don't want to bore you with my humble brags of where I'm going, what I'm doing. Type. I want to make this kind of more universal. I guess. What have you guys learned for what makes sense for you to do? Is there kind of any general advice for everyone as around this? And then I want to take this more into more spiritual realms of abiding and with the divine abodes. So I'll get into that in a little bit. I'm trying to see if there's any ground I haven't covered with the more traditional dwellings in the world. I think wherever our spiritual practice is at, it makes sense to um, set aside part of the year or part of our time to go outside our own personal space, maybe into retreat or pilgrimage or adventure, something related to spirituality outside our regular practices. So, whether you go on a pilgrimage, whether you go on retreat, whether you join workshops, whether you go exploring in the wilderness, I think part of the time every year, or maybe you make up for it every few years, needs to be considered and the benefits weighed about that. Kind of getting outside our comfort zone, getting a different perspective and viewpoint and angles on what our everyday thing is. And then ideally with inspiration to bring back to our everyday practice and those around us. So I find that's really important, at least for part of our lives. Maybe that's not just viable or helpful. Maybe doesn't work for everybody, but it's definitely something to consider and weigh. And then I think with our own daily practice, where are we doing our own daily practices? How are we abiding? Where do we have a adequate space set up to do our practice? And it involves time of day and a space and creating the conditions to allow us to do what we need to do with our spiritual practice. So I think that's another consideration within our greater living arrangements. Now I was have the good fortune to have some friends who have done real estate and things like this, and that were landlords for a while and got out of it. I don't want to talk too much about them, but I've got maybe some ethical considerations, around this. On one hand, I don't see where it's really my own personal choice to profit from um, people's living situations, right? I mean, I think having a roof overhead, having simple, basic, adequate shelter is a basic human right. I mean, it's a need, right? I don't really agree with everybody having to slave away their lives, do something they don't want to do in order just to have this shelter need. But I also don't condone laziness either, and thinking entitlement, everything should just be given to me without me having to be responsible at least, or even at least think about contributing. So then again, how do we view these like huge real estate deals that are involved in things that people aren't their basic needs, different types of recreation and, something that's extra. So I don't really have any good answers for this. So just looking at a place to combine all this, and we found some place where I would be able to live part time, and then when I'm not there, have it rented out to tourists as well, um, kind of like a rental pool. So in that way, I'm not capitalizing on people's long-term need for their own personal shelter. This is kind of a transient thing, which I'm kind of doing myself. So, and plus, then it's managed, and so there's a potential slight income involved, but also a place to go and stay for certain times of the year. It doesn't make sense for me to just kind of either in the States, there's a lot of long-term, like a year-long lease or rental agreements, or you have to buy and then people have to get mortgages and things like this. So those, I'll just say don't seem a really good fit right now where I'm at, especially coming out of more long-term relationship. So, it's and then yeah. So those are the practical things. I'm kind of overly practical sometimes, and that gets in the way of a lot of things, but it's also helpful in a lot of situations too. So thank you guys for all the hearts. I really appreciate that. Wow. You guys are amazing. Hopefully your hand isn't getting sore hitting all the hearts. And but yeah, I feel that. Thank you. Same back to you guys. All right, so now the Brahma Vihara is the real good, juicy stuff here. So no matter what our situation is, no matter how well we're doing or how short we're seeming to fall on this, the divine abidings, the sublime abidings, the Brahma Viharas, as they're called. You guys probably hear me talk a lot about these if you listen, and they really can't be understated enough. What is our heart dwelling in? Is it dwelling in anger and frustration? Is it dwelling in excess or things that aren't the best for us, and then we feel even worse about that? Or are we dwelling in kindness, loving kindness to ourselves and others? Where we're a gift to others because they can sense that they're safe in our presence, and they can let their guard down and feel okay around us, and then us feeling okay in our own skin. And when we can't, then we can have compassion for ourselves, or when people are meeting hard times, when we're really in the midst of suffering, then that kindness can turn to compassion, and we can acknowledge the reality of the situation and offer what we can do with the capacities we have to make it better, to alleviate suffering. So with a kind, compassionate heart, we can meet these challenges and want to do and be there for whatever capacity we can. And so this is so helpful, I feel, when things really get rough, because things can get rough, and they do. We are humans, and we will experience pain. And what's the best way to meet pain, as far as I know? Pain, physical, emotional, mental, psychic pain, is with compassion. And having compassion for the times when we can't have compassion as well, as they say. Claude says, that's what I am trying to do with people and animals. Well, yeah. So there is no trying, only doing, right? You are doing it. Either you're doing it or you're not. And it's okay if we're doing it and falling short. And that's part of the practice too. And just the intention, like you say, Claudia, is so important as well. The intention, because we can't always control the outcome. We can't always control how other people and other beings will receive us. But what we can kind of have a lot of say over is how our heart, where we incline our heart and mind towards. That's what we can. Now, we don't ignore the outcomes and how things are taken, but we realize we can't control that to 100% of our liking all the time. And so we use that as a feedback to adjust our behavior and what we do. So it's not all bad news, though, right? So when that friendliness meets another's happiness, this is a tough one, at least for me sometimes, is instead of being jealous and envious and why isn't this happening to me, I can be happy for their happiness. And then with this practice, I can actually kind of piggyback and feed off that joy, not in a vampiric way, but in a celebratory, celebrating way. And then I'm just as happy. So not just one person being happy, I can be happy for their happiness. And they kind of had all the good stuff happen, so I get to share in that with them and rejoice in this. And I've found this is one way to cut through kind of inauthentic people having delight in other people's misgivings or just bad behavior. If I just join in and say, yeah, be happy for your happiness, may it continue, may it increase, may it never cease, I find that sincerity of really wanting to be that, if there is any kind of shenanigans involved, at least for me, they have seemed to fall away, and that's okay too. And then there's more authenticity. But yeah, we can, there's how many supposedly billions people on the earth. If we can be happy for all the happiness, then we have way greater chances. And then, of course, equanimity, this kind of balance and stability, that there's some things that we just really can't do anything about. But what we can do is be okay with it when we can't, actively be involved or do anything. And then also stay out of people's ways, stay out of our own ways sometimes, and realize that yeah, I can't make decisions for people. I can't live their lives for them. They have to make their own choices. And sometimes we make bad choices, or I'll just say I make bad choices, and then I have to deal with the consequences. And there's things that are just happening in our lives. And how well am I when I'm not getting my way? What do I do with that? I have a choice at any given moment, how I see it and how I respond to it. So bearing the burdens that we need to bear, and then sitting down the burdens and abandoning the burdens we don't need to bear as well, and using it as motivation to make good choices, or skillful choices, I would say, that will result in have results. It's skillful results. Easy for me to say, right? All right. I think that's going to be all for now. So, how are you guys, or close to all for now? How are you guys dwelling? Where is your heart dwelling? Where's your mind dwelling? How kind are you with yourself? And where do we need to motivate ourselves more and have kind of more urgency? Where are we lacking urgency? Where are the choices that we're putting off that we know we need to make? And can we be okay with if we just don't feel like making those choices? We can be kind with ourselves until we eventually will have to be faced with making certain choices we've been putting off. Yeah. Where's the carrot? Where's the stick? And reflecting on the goodness that has occurred to us and the goodness that we have given as well. Always find amazing places for the heart and mind to dwell in and uplift and be reminded of, and continue to inspire and aspire us into things that are going to be of our benefit and benefit of those around us. And how can we hold each other accountable, and our friends too, and leaning on our friends and having our friends lean on us, backing up and supporting our friends and valuing them, and just letting them know how important they are in our lives, and how the Buddha even said one time that basically the entirety of the spiritual path is spiritual friendship. So not letting that go to waste, maybe being more proactive, reaching out and maintaining relationships, especially for us guys who just don't normally gravitate towards maintaining relationships with friends. Where I think the feminine is really good at valuing friendships and relationships more. So, all right, with that, may you all be and dwell well, and find your most optimal, ideal conditions and dwellings externally and internally, for your own benefit and for the benefit of all beings everywhere. May all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free. Hopefully that's not too annoying.